Hello everybody and welcome to NFI Hammer. In this video I will be discussing 4 different base techniques that a beginner such as myself have been learning and experimenting with, and I just thought I'd try and share that knowledge with other people. So this is a desert sand and stone base. So it was this very expensive sand that you buy and you PVA glue it on. Check out this video if you want to see step by step how this works. It's really good if you want a desert base for your models. It's very cheap if you can source sand locally, and I'd say it's probably a medium difficulty. Next up is my favorite of the bases. This is a moon base. I did an entire video dedicated to how to do this effect, but it's essentially the same as the previous one, except you paint over it with storm vermin fur, and then do some dry brushing of light colors. And I also have glued in some bigger rocks. This one is definitely the most time consuming of all the bases, but I think the effect that you see, is warranted if you like this sort of style of base. Next up is probably the easiest of the bases. So this was just using Astro Granite, which is a Citadel technical paint. And it kind of creates a much more simple, flat one, which is good if you've got complicated models to glue on. It's definitely easiest, so this one you can knock out really quickly with just one application, some shade and some dry brushing. And then this video is going to be exploring kind of a hybrid technique where you use Astro Granite for some of the base, but then also adding some Martian iron crust to create some variation in it. You can see here that it's got this nice cracked effect, as well as some of the flat area to glue the model on. I think it's kind of quite a good look, and it's almost as easy as just the regular Astro Granite base. So how I created this effect was pretty straightforward. As I said, it's not actually that time consuming to put together, and it kind of creates an interesting dual effect. So I start off with some Citadel technical iron crust, and I apply that to just a small section of the model. So this is where you want the big variation crack surface to be showing. You don't want to put this where the model's going to be standing, because it'll make gluing the model on harder, as well as it won't really be seen as well. I just am using a paddle pop here from an ice cream to just apply it on. It was quite a thick texture. I wasn't really expecting it to be like sand. It's very different to the Astro Granite. Speaking of which, that's the next paint that we're going to apply. So again, using a different paddle pop, or the different side of the paddle pop, I'm just applying the Astro Granite paint to the rest of the base. This gives it kind of like a 2-height texture, as well as 2 different textures themselves. Once it's dry, you can see here it looks a bit silly because one is red and one is grey, so I'm just coating the whole base with the storm vermin fur. This is pretty straightforward. You can still see that some of the iron crust is showing through, but I don't mind having a little bit of discrepancy. It gives it a bit of uniqueness. Next is a shade. I was experimenting with something very different, and I used the Reikland Flesh shade that has a reddy tinge. In hindsight, I probably would have just stuck with something like Agrax Earthshade for brown, or Nuln Oil for black. I think the red is a little bit distracting and a bit too vibrant, but you can really do whatever you want. The idea is that the shade will pull into the recesses, creating a bit of a difference in color. And then it's dry brushing time, so you can literally pick any color you like for this. Because I'm using Necrons that have a lot of green Gauss imagery, I like to make the dry brush purple because it kind of color wheel wise complements each other well. However, you can just stick with the white, similar to the moon base as I showed earlier. You can do yellows, you can do greens, you can do blues, anything really, if you just give it a little bit of color to pop. So once that dry brush was applied, then I just pick a lighter color. This case it's lighter purple. With the moon bases, I usually do white with like a yellowy tinge dry brush to kind of give it at least a little bit of color. But yeah, again, this is like heaps of room for experimentation. And then once it's finished, you just glue the model on, and you glue it onto sort of the flat surface. Here I'm using PVA glue. I know a lot of people prefer super glue. I didn't want to kind of glue it in super hard in case I wanted to abort and take it off. Let me know in the comments if there's a better way of doing it. Then it's just a matter of trying to find a way of balancing it so that the glue can dry. Here I'm just propping it against like a book so that it's standing up straight. There are some fancy ways I've seen of people with toothpicks and stuff trying to hold it into position, but really you just want to kind of hold it somewhere so that the glue has time to dry. Then I'm adding some foliage just to kind of break up the base because it's a bit boring without anything else. A lot of people like to glue skulls or destroyed weapons, big stones. Here I've just got a tuft of grass that I'm just sticking on there. And this is the final product. So I'm really happy with how it turned out. I definitely think that a different shade color would probably make the model more interesting, but in terms of difficulty, this is only just very slightly harder than just applying a layer of astrogranite, but it gives such a different variety to it because the astrogranite is quite boring and quite dull. So I definitely recommend, if you are going for something quick, consider adding a little bit of Martian iron crust into the mix just to create that variety and difference. If you've made it this far, consider leaving a like, comment and subscribe. It really helps me out a lot. And until next time, see you later.